whether it's a phone, tablet, laptop, and we'll stick with the mobile devices for this particular topic.
Yes.
But obviously that introduces an element of, how do you you obviously have to charge your batteries, and I think everyone is aware of how to do that. It's not terribly difficult, but obviously there are methods and suggestions to how to do that to, I guess, maximize not only the battery life during the day, but also its lifespan to get it to last for as long as possible. And it's interesting that I guess an analogy would be like, like the internal combustion engine in a car. The technology hasn't really changed. It's like it's been tweaked and improved by tech companies and battery manufacturers, etc. over the years. It's still operating on the same fundamental principles, which is effectively don't leave it plugged in, don't leave your laptop plugged in indefinitely, for instance. Don't like drain it all the way to zero often, or don't do like full 0 to 100% charges on it every single day. I found it interesting on some of these tips that we were looking at that, it was like, don't let it go. Ideally, you wouldn't let it go under 20%, and you wouldn't charge over 80%, and just keep the electrons flowing and stuff.
That's right.
It's fascinating that, we've got to the point where this is working pretty well, but it is still kind of old tech, really, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, we've had lithium-ion batteries now for, I think better part of 10 years. Longer now. Like, they started off, I think, in laptops, and when we were still using video cameras, I think we used nickel cadmium a lot, and that had its own memory system where you had to discharge and recharge fully. And lithium ion's a bit different. I think the most interesting thing is about the overcharging of lithium-ion batteries. And nowadays, the software on the charging, most manufacturers are quite sophisticated, so they do minimize as you get to that 100% from overcharging the battery. But what used to happen, particularly in the old days, is if you've ever sat around a campfire and thrown a can of food, like maybe some baked beans into the fire, and then you watch that can just expand as if it's going to explode, that's effectively what happens when you charge a lithium-ion battery up to 100%. It expands. It's full of energy, and the heat it causes it to disfigure, and if you're unlucky enough, burst into flames. So,
well, I mean, not to give Samsung its old a bit of a slap, but that was the issue with the what was it, the Galaxy whatever.
That's right. It's actually an issue with a number of modern cars, and I'm not going to name them, but you go through the recall notices, and there's a few car models out there right now that you don't park in a garage, because they can spontaneously burst into flame and burn your house down. So it's exactly the same thing.
Which is somewhat disconcerting. And it'll be interesting to know these things, given, battery-powered cars are going to become more of a thing over time. But you would expect that the technology would have to improve for it to become more widely adopted. And I guess the main issue with a lot of this stuff is that although the innovations in how the batteries work, and also just the charging mechanisms, like you said. So, people would notice, why does my charging start to slow down after 80%? It's because the software is chucking it into a trickle charge. And even though it might say 100% while you're charged, while you've still got the plug-in, I should say, it's actually not necessarily always charging, because it's allowing for a little bit of drop and increase and stuff like that. But it's interesting that with all of that innovation and all of that, ultimately that they're really the only things you can do to really sort of extend things. And no matter what you do anyway, over a long enough period of time, the battery's still going to degrade and not be at 100% capacity anyway over X amount of years anyway.
Well, that's right. I mean, it doesn't matter how good a care you take of your battery, you will overcharge it, you will undercharge it from time to time, and those things slowly wear it down. But if you keep it in good shape, then it will last for much, much longer. And good quality batteries by good manufacturers, as we all know, last a lot longer than sometimes the cheap, no-brand lithium replacements you can get. Although, having said that, these days you don't get a choice. So in the old days of cameras, you could go and buy some no-name batteries, and in the early days of laptops, even you could go and buy, and phones, you could buy a second no-name battery to pop into your phone or keep spare. But these days, you get what the manufacturer gives you, and that's also a good reason to get a good manufacturer who provides a good battery and a good charging system.
Absolutely. The other thing that struck me about this was it's that sort of more global, I guess, bigger story around what's the next advance in battery technology. Because, back in the, we've had that laugh before about the dumb phones back in the, late 90s and 2000s that would, last a week on their battery. But that's because the phones...
Happy days.
But that's because they weren't particularly demanding on the resources. So I guess the next step that would be truly impressive is if you get your smartphone that is, in all intents and purposes, a computer that does so many things, and they're powerful. They've got powerful chips in them. We demand so much from them in terms of capability and tasks, etc. The next step would be that a battery that could power say a smartphone like that, but would last a week without a charge. That would be the next step. That would be really impressive.
Well, it is really interesting, and you wonder how they might do these things. There are watches now. I think Garmin's got one out that's a solar watch that goes from, I think, 24 days roughly between charges to 56 or something like that if you get it out and use it in the sun. I don't know why people haven't added that to phones yet, because we had the old solar calculators back in the day, and I know that the drain on phones is a lot greater, but phones are mostly out of a lot of people's pockets anyway. So you'd think a few solar panels on there, maybe you get a little bit of trickle charge, and or at least let the phone work at neutral power.
Absolutely, and I'm sure that someone's working on that right now.
I hope so.
They just build it into the glass panel on the front somehow, or whatever it is they need to do.
Wouldn't that be more useful than a folding phone, for instance?
Exactly.
The other thing is you won't be able to tell, but I've been looking at watches recently. There is one watch that works on solar power and the heat generated from your body. So considering that phones are normally in pockets or out, if you put in solar glass and some sort of heat charging capacity from being stuck in your pants all day, maybe we'd never need to charge again.
That's very appealing if they can figure that one out. The one other thing I wanted to touch on before we move on was just wireless charging, and just like some comments I had on that, which was it's nice that it's there, but I've never really found a practical use for it. And I think largely it's because you can't use the phone while it's sitting on a pad. I know Apple came up with that magnetic charger thing for the iPhone 12, so you could pick it up, but that's really a variation on it being plugged in anyway. And it's just, it's like one of those things, like it sounds like cool tech, and I guess it is cool tech because, you just chuck it on the table and, it can charge, but it seems to have not quite the practical use that I would have expected from it.
Well, and we know that because if they were any good, everyone would have one